Welcome to Super Talk, the podcast that scratches your superhero itch. Just two suburban dads nerding out over superhero stuff on the small screen and the big. Buckle up, people. Enjoy the ride.
Welcome to Super Talk, the weekly podcast dedicated to news and reviews of comic book media on the big and small screen. This is episode 153. I'm your host, Brian Professor Pettis, and with me, as always, my illustrious co-host, Titanium Claus Estrella.
Ho, ho, ho. Merry Christmas.
Happy holidays to everybody out there.
Happy holidays and Merry Christmas. Welcome to the Christmas episode, ladies and gentlemen. We are on TikTok Live. We were talking about this, how to do a show and how to do TikTok and kind of how to all coordinate this. We got a YouTube show going on right now, and obviously we're gonna post this to all major podcast networks out there. But we'll do like a separate TikTok Live one day.
Yeah,
maybe around.
It's really hard to interact with the audience when you're doing a podcast.
Yeah.
Those who are able to do that regularly are professionals, and we're just mere amateurs. However, we do want to take that opportunity. So maybe sometime here over the holiday break, maybe we'll just jump on TikTok, and do a TikTok Live and do some live Q&A with the audience and talk about a few things that are going on in the industry. So
yeah, bounce stuff around, invite some of our,
we'll give it a shot.
our followers.
And it's all going to be based on how you guys respond, right? If it goes really well, we'll keep doing those things. So.
Very cool. Absolutely.
All right, well, let's get into it. First, I want to do a reviews of the most recent show that we had released, and that's Creature Commandos. I mean, how good is this show?
I'm going to go out on a limb and say I really like it. I mean, is it as good as Invincible, Image Comics show? I don't think so, but damn, it's good. I like it a lot. I think the character development is great. There's a lot of comparisons with Suicide Squad. Yes, it's James Gunn. Is it like Suicide Squad? A little, sorta. They pull people out of prison to go on these impossible missions. Yeah, a little, sorta, but I think it's great. I really like it a lot.
So my opinion of this is James Gunn has his fingerprints all over this. Number one. Of course. And I think what we're seeing, which I think you and I assumed was going to be the case, is that everything prior to James Gunn taking over that was part of the Snyderverse is gone, deleted, never happened, not referred to. It's like it never existed. But everything that James Gunn did before he took over is still
they reference it in here. Yeah.
Right.
What happened with the Starro? What happened on the island with Starro?
And his Suicide Squad movie.
Sure.
And
they mentioned that. They reference that.
Peacemaker.
Yep.
Will be and Amanda Waller.
Yep.
All of that. So basically his side of DC, the things he had worked on in DC, Peacemaker and Suicide, was it the Suicide Squad movie? That's being referenced directly in this animated production. And the other part of this, I'll say, it's vulgar, it's
gory,
violent, and gory.
Yeah.
They don't pull any punches on the gore. I mean, some of these episodes, when you shoot somebody, they don't just get shot and fall to the ground. Their heads explode.
Yeah.
And they are, when you
arms
dismember
and limbs.
people, you like pull arms and legs off of them. And it's very akin to, you reference Invincible, but very akin to that they're not shy about showing, animated violence.
Now, is that why I love the show? Because it's so ultra violent and it's gory? No, I think it's well written. The pace seems to be very steady and very engaging. And I'm looking forward to next episodes, which is a huge tell, right? Whenever you get an audience looking forward to a next episode, you got them. It's a hook, line, and sinker for me. So I think it's really well.
Let's give the audience a little bit of a refresher on who the Creature Commandos are. So again, we have been introduced in James Gunn's previous productions to Task Force X, which was run by Amanda Waller, a secret government agency of superpowered beings that the government that were effectively prisoners that the government used. They were let's just say cannon fodder. Let's going to send them on missions, and we're going to put these devices in their brains so that if they get out of line, we can shock them and ultimately kill them if we have to. And that's pretty much what happened in the Suicide Squad movies. Every one of them were criminals, and they were being used by Task Force X to complete missions on behalf of the government. Well, after that last mission with Starro in the movie failed, that Task Force X was discontinued.
Right.
And they said we couldn't use human beings any longer,
Right.
And so she said, well, there's a little loophole in that we're not using human beings, we're using monsters.
Yeah.
And so the creature commandos are, we'll say, non-human based creatures that are now on this similar task force. And the leader of the Suicide Squad was Rick Flag, and his father, Rick Flag Sr., is now the leader of Creature Commandos.
Right.
And they referenced that his son had died
Yeah.
in the Suicide Squad movie, was killed by Peacemaker.
Yeah.
But yeah, so we see Rick Flag Sr. take over, get introduced to all of the characters that are going to be part of his team.
Essentially introducing us to the new DCU, because all of this and the story that he's telling in this will continue throughout the theme of his new DCU. We're going to see these characters, even the voice characters.
The voice actors will play these characters in live action.
Yep. Mm-hmm. So Rick Flag Sr. will be in Superman, played by the same actor.
Right. It's voiced by Frank Grillo, who played who did he play in the
Crossbones?
Crossbones in the MCU. Yeah, so he's voicing Rick Flag Sr., and he's going to play Rick Flag Sr. I believe he's already been seen on set for the Superman movie. But yeah, every one of these voice actors, including Sean Gunn, who is James Gunn's brother, plays voices GI Robot as well as Weasel, who really doesn't have a lot of voice, but but he'll be reprising his roles there. But the voice actors coming back in live action, I think that's we saw a little bit of that in the Marvel What If series of some of the voice actors coming back and voicing their characters in What If, and I think it only makes sense if you're familiar with those characters.
Well, for continuity,
right.
I think it does make sense. When people hear that voice and then they see it in live action, there's a continuity structure there that I think is super important.
Right.
Yeah.
So we've had 3 episodes so far. This comes out on Thursdays, I believe.
Yep.
Right, Thursdays.
Mm-hmm.
So the new episode will be coming out in a couple days. The first 3 episodes were really, the first one was an introductory episode to the team and all the different members of the team and what their mission is. And they get sent to this country called Pokolistan.
Yes.
Pokolistan. And there's a princess there who's now in charge of the country, and it's being attacked by Cersei. She's a magic-based superhero character from Themyscira.
Yeah.
As a matter of fact, and she's attacking.
Themyscira is
where Wonder Woman's from,
correct.
Right?
Mm-hmm.
But she has magic powers, and she's attacking or threatening the princess, and the creature commandos are sent there to protect her. There's something very squirrely about the princess.
Yeah.
She wastes no time in coming on to Rick Flag Sr. And basically,
attacking him,
jumping him.
Yeah.
But we get that in the first episode, and there's a little bit of an introduction there. The second episode, and I like what they're doing here, and I think we're going to get this through the rest of the series. They're spending an episode to give us the backstory of each of these characters.
Yeah.
So the second episode focused on the bride, which for all intents and purposes is the bride of Frankenstein. And we get her entire backstory of Dr. Frankenstein creating his Frankenstein's monster. Frankenstein's monster was lonely and wanted somebody that he could love. And so he begged Dr. Frankenstein to create.
Well, he forced him. Yeah.
Yeah. Effectively forced him to create this, a bride for him. He created the bride. Funny enough, the bride ends up falling in love with Dr. Frankenstein, and then they end up getting it on, which is all kinds of crazy in the show. And Frankenstein's monster sees it, gets pissed off, kills Dr. Frankenstein, and
Yeah.
runs off. So we get that entire backstory of how she came about. And to come to find out that Frankenstein's monster has been chasing her throughout history. So for, couple of 100 years he's been trying to find her, and every time he finds her he tries to capture her, and
He's a great character. The way they portray Frankenstein,
yeah,
what a great character. And even the bride. I mean,
Yeah.
I think those two right now are my favorite two characters. Just that relationship and that tension between the two and what's happening with them. I think it's brilliant.
Yeah.
And Frankenstein is this kind of mindless dope that is like obsessed.
Yeah.
And it's great.
Yeah, I think we're going to see a little bit more of him as the series moves on. We've only seen flashbacks and a little reference to him, but we haven't seen him in the show quite yet, other than the flashbacks that we had in episode 2. At the end of episode 2, there was a big fight scene between Circe and primarily the bride. And they went toe to toe with each other, and ultimately Circe got the upper hand.
Yeah.
And then that's how that episode ended. And then the third episode focused on GI Robot, who is great character, was a robot that was built by the U.S. Army to fight Nazis in World War II, and its sole purpose was to kill Nazis.
Kill Nazis, yeah.
He had a sole program. It was basically an artificial intelligence in a robot that was built to kill and destroy Nazis, and he was really good at it.
Yeah.
And then ultimately, we find out that he'd been discontinued, and they didn't want to keep using him because obviously they'd won the war.
Well, he was studied, and I think some nefarious people studied him to try to replicate what he was all about.
Right.
So yeah, it's kind of cool.
But he ended up in like a pawn shop, and some war fanatic ends up buying him, and then come to find out this war fanatic and so brings him in and makes him part of his family. And then the war fanatic ends up being part of a white supremacist group, and he brings GI Robot to this white supremacist group party or meeting. And when they, show the Nazi flag on the wall, he goes absolutely bonkers and kills everybody, which is how he ended up in Belray prison.
Yeah.
Hysterical. But then
Yeah.
he ends up saving the day. They go back to the castle where it's under attack by Circe and her group, and GI Robot just goes ham and kills everybody until Circe blows him up. We'll kind of find out what ends up happening there, but the team ends up getting the best of Circe, and they capture her at the end of the episode. So that's where we're going to be going into episode 4. But
yeah, I really like the series. I think it's
very entertaining.
Do you remember how many we're getting? How many episodes?
I don't remember. I believe it's 8. Though.
I 8 says
7 or 8. I believe
8 is in my head, but I can't remember exactly. But still great. If we're only 3 in and we got 5 more, I mean, it's great.
Yeah. So I'm really looking forward to the rest of this. I mean, it's very entertaining. Again, it's, would I put it on par with, Invincible or even What If? No, I think the stories it's very different, but I like the fact that James Gunn used this kind of lighthearted animated series to kind of introduce us to his DCU, right? So very, very cool.
I would put it right there with What If for me in the pecking order. I've always said animation and live action, they have a different scale for me. A live action is always going to outweigh animation for me, even though I love animation like, X-Men 97 and the other animated shows that are out there, but it's on a different grading scale for me. And I would put it right there in line with What If for me.
Yeah,
not as good as Invincible, because I just love that show, but it's right there.
Yeah, the difference is I think What If season 1 was great. What If season 2, I think both you and I were a little disappointed in from a plot perspective. It just seemed the plot point was a little weak. As a quick reminder to everybody, What If season 3 comes out on Sunday. We are going to be getting, just like they did last year with season 2.
How are they rolling that out?
They're rolling it out 1 episode a day, all through the holidays. So from Sunday through, I think it's 7 episodes, maybe 8, Sunday through Sunday. I believe we're going to get 1 episode a day every day over the Christmas break. So great way to spend, your holiday vacation and catch up on What If season 3.
A lot of fun. Yeah.
We've seen some previews in the trailers for season 3. We know there's going to be like a Gundam style episode where the heroes have mechs, and then they combine into like a Voltron type of thing. And so And then there's a Wild West episode with Shang-Chi, and I can't remember who else was in it.
Yeah.
But anyway, I'm looking forward to it. I mean, it'll be fun. Some distractions over the holidays. It'd be great.
Absolutely.
So let's jump into the news section. We got a lot of stuff that's happened over the last couple of weeks, and you know, I don't know about you, Titanium. I mean, we get this anytime there's a lull in movies, or mainstream movies, I'll say, and there's a lot of rumor and conjecture that gets thrown out there by people, and I think I break it down into thirds. There's, you know, kind of like highly reliable sources that are citing, you know, their sources that have a proven track record, and you kind of like, okay, this is pretty cool. Then you have the unreliable sources that some of it ends up true, some of it doesn't end up true. And then you have people that are just spitballing,
Well,
throwing stuff at the wall.
Well, they're not just spitballing.
Or they're
what they're
hoping.
doing, yeah, they're looking for a rage bait, which is putting something so outrageous out there that you know you're going to get a lot of interaction to it because people are infuriated with what you're saying, number one, and that helps the status of that account. Number two, clickbait. So they're going to put something out there that they think is going to happen, or they're trying to connect some weird, funky dots, you know, like, oh, well, in Spider-Man 4, he's going to fight Mephisto and
Right.
Ghost Rider. People, that is outrageous, first of all. And second of all, it's clickbait. They just looking for engagement to enhance their account. Yeah.
They got to do something. So I try to stay away from it. And there's been a lot of stuff about plot leaks for Doomsday and Secret War and all. I mean, I try to stay away. We are so far away from those movies, even starting filming.
Sure.
So I try to stay away from that. So the stuff I want to talk about is some of the things that we either know have happened or there's been reliable sources behind them, and we can kind of talk through it. So the first one is, which we assumed all along, Chris Evans is confirmed to be coming back for Avengers Doomsday. This was a big announcement, bringing him back. I think we all assumed that when the Russo brothers got attached to Doomsday and Secret Wars, we had the feeling that most of the mainstream Marvel actors were going to come back for Secret Wars.
Like, it wouldn't shock you if they announced Scarlett Johansson coming back next week.
She's already rumored to be coming back. The two that have somewhat been confirmed so far are Chris Evans and Haley Atwell coming back as Peggy Carter. That being said, with Chris Evans coming back, there's a lot of, again,
rumors,
speculation as to how and why he's coming back. And some of those sources out there that are very reliable have said, well, from what I'm hearing, most of these actors and actresses will be playing multiple roles in these movies, which leads us to believe that they may be playing alternate universe variants of their characters. Right. So Captain America from an alternate universe that's a bad guy that's aligned with Doctor Doom could happen, right?
Or Hydra, right.
Or we could have him also coming back as the real Captain America, you know, from the past, you know, when he went back into the past to live his life with Peggy Carter. So we don't know anything. There's a lot of assumptions back there, but again, don't be surprised when we're hearing these announcements of, you know, Scarlett Johansson coming back.
He's coming back as Nomad. He's coming back as Hydra. He's coming. I mean, there's a lot of speculation. We don't know.
But the fact that they're coming back is encouraging.
That's great.
And I think it is a way for them to tie a big bow around the current iteration of the MCU. We know they're going to be doing a massive reboot of the MCU.
Lazy. It's not lazy, people. No. It's not lazy. It's called smart business.
Yeah. It's called
when you have a horse that's winning races, you don't put it in the stable.
Yeah, it's called nostalgia. I mean, I think
put it on the track.
Right. And I think they're going to reboot the MCU after Secret Wars.
Agree.
And, you know, I think the only characters that are going to be sticking around in their current form or fashion are the more recent ones, like the Fantastic Four, which are going to be introducing here next year. I fully expect them to stick around, and maybe a few others, but most of them will be recast and we'll get a reboot. And again, we've heard that the next phase of Marvel after Secret Wars is really going to focus on the mutant saga and introducing the X-Men and all kinds of other things. And Kevin Feige said, don't be surprised if you see a handful of them in upcoming projects. So does he trickle them into the MCU and then ultimately, they become part of the reboot?
We've always said one of the greatest ways to bring them in, like Deadpool, Wolverine, is sideways. Trickle them into to some of these big motion pictures little by little.
Yep.
And then give me a standalone Storm movie.
Right.
Give me what I want.
Right.
Damn it.
So another thing that we got a couple of days ago, there were rumors out there about us getting a trailer for the new Superman, James Gunn's new Superman movie.
Dun, 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 dun,
Right.
dun,
We
dun,
got
dun,
a
dun.
teaser for that movie dropped by James Gunn on Twitter a couple of days ago with an announcement that the trailer is coming this Thursday. So, hey, to drop a trailer for this movie,
Teaser trailer this Thursday.
that'll get people excited, I think.
The internet was on fire, Professor. I mean, he dropped a poster. It was kind of like a GIF poster that had some movement to it with some of the soundtrack or some of the music laid in behind it. First of all, sounds phenomenal.
It's
unbelievable.
like a slight deviation on the Williams kind of original Superman.
Williams, like a Hans Zimmer Williams kind of mesh up. It sounds so great. People are losing their mind. And I can't remember. I guess it was Deadpool Wolverine, where I saw so many, not only Hollywood shills, but insiders and novice fans like ourselves, people that are kind of content creators like ourselves, go absolutely apeshit over this. I'm telling you, the vibe I got from the internet when just this poster dropped and the announcement that we're going to get a teaser trailer on Thursday was so massive and had such an impact on the internet. I think this movie's going to really take off.
Let's hope it's good. Number one, it needs to be good. As we've said.
Let's rephrase that. It has to be good.
If James Gunn's version of the DCU has any chance of success, this movie has to be good. And so they're going to put everything they have behind it.
Professor, this is this is a debate going online for you. A question for you, Professor. What do you think is more important? And I think we've talked about this several times. What do you think is more important? The MCU Fantastic Four, a lot riding on that movie, or Superman?
No, I think the Fantastic Four is not as important because I think Marvel's put all of their eggs in the Robert Downey Jr.
Doomsday,
Doctor Doom, Secret Wars bag. So I think Fantastic Four really just needs to be somewhat successful, and those characters will follow on into the other projects.
100% agree.
And Superman is a standalone project. It has a lot of characters in that.
It's a catalyst to the new DCU.
And let's just hope it's a ramp that leads us into bigger and better things for James Gunn's DCU. We know some of the projects he already has planned. He's got a Batman Brave and the Bold movie. He's got a Supergirl movie. He's got a Green Lantern project on HBO Max. We've got a bunch of things that we know are coming.
Yeah.
So this has got to be the launching point for all of that. Other than the way that the Snyderverse kind of ended up, Man of Steel, still to this day, one of my favorite,
no question,
superhero movies of all time.
Huge shoes to fill.
That was a enormous success. It was a fantastic movie.
Yeah.
And if you saw that movie and said, oh my God, and that's what we all said, I can't wait to see where they go with this. And it all went downhill from there.
Yeah.
I hope this is a ramp that gets people going excited and they have some momentum.
Here's my other question for you. Do you move Fantastic Four? Do you shift it to Thanksgiving?
No.
Okay.
No.
Why? It comes out 2 weeks after Superman.
Yeah, I don't. We're in the prime time of
in July.
We are in the prime time of the summer movie season. There's good movies coming out every other week during summer.
Okay,
you can't avoid that. And why would Marvel do that? That makes no sense whatsoever.
Give it space from a little more space.
But you're also making the assumption that
from
Superman's
Thunderbolts
so good. We don't know that yet.
No, you don't.
Yeah.
You don't, but it gives Thunderbolts a few more legs couple more weeks in the theaters without Superman or anything, and
I mean,
the
look,
anticipation of
just look
Fantastic
at what's
Four.
happened here recently. We
It gives
had
the VRX. It gives the I'm sorry. It gives the the special effects people a little more time to refine the movie. I don't know.
they're already done filming. They're done
I think
filming.
it might be a good thing to move it back, but I don't think they're going to. But
No, I don't think they will.
I don't think they will
And the
either.
fact that they're releasing it the day of Comic Con opens is also another big boon for them. It not only from a, as we saw with Deadpool and Wolverine last year, huge interaction with
Oh
the
yeah,
audience at Comic
yeah,
Con, huge interaction with social media.
huge buzz.
Right. So
Yeah,
they're good. They would miss out on all that. I
yep.
think moving it to November would be terrible. I don't think they will. I think that they're going to keep it right where it is. Look at what's happened here recently in the movies. We had Gladiator and Wicked both came out on the exact same weekend, and 2 weeks later, you had Moana 2 come out. And I mean, these movies know that these movies, other movies are coming out. They can't avoid it,
Yeah.
but it's the holiday season. They're like, look, this is what people do over the holidays to go see movies.
Mhm.
Same thing in the summer. People go see movies. So I don't think that they're going to be afraid of stepping on each other's toes there. Look, if Superman is that good that people would rather see Superman a second time before they see Fantastic Four a first time, I don't see that happening.
Mm-hmm.
I just don't see that happening.
I think Comic-Con, you don't miss out on that. It's too big of an
No,
opportunity.
too
Yeah.
big of an opportunity. Absolutely. So we did get a teaser from Chris Pratt. He was out promoting some other projects he's got going on, and he did drop a little bit of a hint that the movie that was teased at the end of Guardians of the Galaxy 3, the legendary Star-Lord movie project, is in the works at Marvel. Now, when is the big question? Because we only know of 3 other movies that are coming out right now that are definitely coming out before Secret Wars. 3 movies, including Secret. We know after this next year, when the Fantastic Four comes out in July, there's no other movies from Marvel for the rest of 2025. But in 2026, we have Avengers Doomsday, and at the end of 2026, we have Spider-Man 4, and then we have Secret Wars the following year in May. Those are the only movies we know that are coming out.
Yeah.
So the question is, if this is, it must be very early on in development, but that would lead me to believe that Star-Lord and some version of the Guardians of the Galaxy will survive into the next phase of Marvel.
Yeah. If it's true, it could
Right.
just be
Speculation.
speculation on his part and throwing it out there so that he stays in the. I could see Star-Lord being part of the Nova TV series
Which you also know is in the works.
We know it's in the works. They just nailed down a showrunner for that, the guy that does Criminal Minds. So I think that's a really good get for Marvel for that. Nova, I'm excited about that. It's going to be based on the Richard Rider storyline,
I
which
believe
I
they're
think
going to bring Annihilus in for that
as the
well.
main villain.
Yeah.
Here's my problem with that: is it great for a TV series? Yes, because
That's the perfect place to bring a
it's
character
the perfect
like that in.
because he's not that popular. Not that many
Right.
people know he's a huge
That's
villain.
the best place to
Huge
introduce
villain.
somebody. Right.
It's perfect. But I could see Star-Lord in that show.
Yeah.
As a cameo,
yeah.
potentially. It's going to be a cosmic based show.
All right, we did get our final trailer for Captain America: Brave New World here like a week ago, and that's being shown in theaters now. That movie is scheduled to be released in February. They have finally finished their third or fourth round of reshoots now.
Yeah.
I think they did wrap those here recently, and we have been told now that the budget for this movie. This is now going to be one of the most expensive MCU movies ever made because of all the reshoots and delays and rewrites and all the other things they've had to do to this movie. They had some test screenings that did not go well, and then went back for more reshoots. And this has been going on a long time.
Yeah.
It's finally done. But this movie now, the budget for this movie has eclipsed Infinity War, which tells you how much money they're spending on it. And
over 350 million.
Yeah, what I believe, and this is, they need this movie to be successful because I believe it has a lot of important things that happen in this movie that lead into Doomsday and Secret Wars and future things that are happening. I wouldn't be surprised if there's not a direct link between Captain America: Brave New World and the Thunderbolts, which comes out in May. And so they need it to be successful, because if people don't go see it, they're going to be confused when future things come out, because there's stuff that happens in here that's going to be important.
I've
And
said this 100 times. You know my feelings about this movie, the Red Hulk. If they nerf the Red Hulk, and I think for the rumor has it that some of the early screenings and reason why they did some reshoots is because Captain America beat the Red Hulk very easily, and people were like, "What? What's that? That's ridiculous," you know. And I hope they fix that if it's true or not. But if they nerf the Hulk and they downgrade the Hulk, the Red Hulk, I'm going to be super upset.
well, we believe, and then again, from what we've seen from the trailers and what some of the industry insiders have been telling, there's three different kind of plots to this movie.
Yeah.
There's the Tiamat Island,
Yep.
adamantium kind of inside threat to the president and his
A
inner
whole
circle,
political thing.
right?
Mhm.
There is the Serpent Society, that's Giancarlo Esposito's character, and them kind of, causing havoc and trouble for Captain America, and we don't really
The
know where that fits
leader,
in.
yeah.
And then there's the leader pulling the strings from behind and ultimately having something to do with the creation of the Red Hulk. And I think from what I've heard from people that were in those early screenings is that the Serpent Society part of the storyline didn't seem to fit.
Yeah.
And I think they're trying to massage that and fix that so that the movie flows a little bit better. And again, the luxury that Marvel has is they can keep throwing money at it until they get it right. And it just tells me that the studio feels that this movie has to be right.
I agree. To throw that much money, to delay it as long as it's been delayed, and to put so much money and so much trust in Anthony Mackie to kind of carry this movie, even though Harrison Ford is in it and he's a megastar himself. But I don't know. I'm
Yeah.
very weary of this
We're
movie.
we're we're
I hope it's good.
definitely, I'll say, cautious, right? When it
I'm
comes,
more excited about the Thunderbolts. I'll
yeah.
go out and say that. I'm more excited, even though, and I don't know how you feel about the trailer is on fire.
Yeah, I love the
That
Thunderbolts.
trailer, the Thunderbolts trailer is on fire, but so is Captain America 4, Brave New World.
And that's what I'm hoping. I'm
Yeah,
hoping that the best parts of the movie we haven't already seen. We've seen that before.
unreal. The trailer is a banger.
Yeah.
But the Thunderbolts, for some reason, I think the Thunderbolts are going to be a sleeper. I mean, I really dig that trailer a lot.
Again, it'll be here before we know it. I mean, February will
Yeah.
be here before we know it, and we'll find out what happens. But I do believe that Anthony Mackie, and again, there's now more rumors after the announcement of Chris Evans coming back. There's now speculation that Chris Evans will be one of the post-credit scenes for that movie, coming back as some version of Captain America. Who knows? But then we also have heard that there's going to be a very similar scene with Nick Fury, kind of recruiting the next version of the Avengers with Anthony Mackie, and who knows? I mean, again, this is a lot of speculation. It'll be here before we know it. We'll figure it all
Yeah.
out. All right. And so Ryan Reynolds, he's great. He was doing a holiday, I guess, promotion or doing something for charity, and he put together a small little video with him and Kidpool trying to save Christmas with the help of Linda Carter. And it was so hysterical that they
Yeah.
brought Linda Carter out and had her do her Wonder Woman twirl.
Yeah.
It was just so awesome. And Ryan Reynolds is he's just a genius when it comes to promotion and marketing. And it's one of the reasons why this charity probably solicited him to do this. But if you haven't seen it, go check it out. It's very funny and worth the watch.
Yeah, YouTube it. It's awesome.
Yeah. All right, well, let's get into our topic of the week this week, brought to us by our friends over at Studio GGG Studios, home of the man band Corn on the Cob.
Yeah, no affiliation with Sony.
No affiliation with Sony. So Titanium and I, along with some of our children, had the pleasure of watching Kraven the Hunter this past weekend. And I think we somewhat did it out of duty, but the other part of it was you saw Madam Web and told me how bad it was. And to this day, I still have yet to see that movie, and I kind of refuse to see it. And from what I had heard was it's not very good, but it's not as bad as Madam Web. And I was like, okay, maybe it's a little entertaining.
And that still holds true.
Right.
That statement is still correct.
Still correct.
As far as I'm concerned,
It's not as bad
and
as
a lot of
Madam Web.
people it's not as bad as Madam Web.
Okay. So let's get into the nitty gritty here. We're going to talk about the movie. So if you haven't seen the movie and plan to see it, we're going to talk about spoilers. But frankly, after we're done telling you about the movie, you probably don't need to see it. It'll be out on video probably before
Raven spoilers incoming.
Yep. It'll be out on video before New Year's, I'm sure.
Yeah.
So the movie, and I just kind of want to describe the way that they laid this movie out, which I think was a big part of the problem of this movie. And there's a big fundamental problem, which we'll get into as well. But the way they laid this out was they had the first part of the movie was really his backstory, right? The backstory of his family and Sergei, Sergei Kravenov, who is the hunter. And as a teenager, growing up with his father and his brother and that whole family history, and then ultimately how he became Kraven the Hunter. So there's that part of the movie. Then there was kind of like a setup of like, there's bad guys out there that are kind of after him and after his family. And then there was kind of the climax at the end of the movie. The first part of the movie, the backstory part of the movie, some of the worst acting and the worst dialogue that I've seen in a movie in a long time. You and I were like watching it, and we were looking over at each other like, is this a paid Hollywood actress?
The whole Calypso aspect and that character was not necessary. I felt like her whole character and her whole backstory and how she injected herself into the story, I felt was forced and not necessary.
Absolutely forced.
And it was atrocious. The dialogue and the acting was atrocious from those two.
So my son and I were like laughing about it on the drive.
Oh, we laughed. I laughed out loud at some point.
Yeah, but like we were talking about it. So hang on a second. The father brings the boys out on this mandatory hunt for this legendary lion that nobody's been able to kill. The boys somehow lag back behind the group, and the lion finds them and attacks them. Okay. And he refuses to shoot it. He gets dragged away by the lion, and Cersei, who just happened to that day be given Calypso just happened that day to be given some special potion from her grandmother, and happened to then go on this safari with her family, and then just for some reason decide to get out of the truck and start wandering into the jungle, and comes across Sergei being dragged by the lion, and then gives him the special potion which imbues him with all these powers.
At least it wasn't the blood of the lion that gave him all of his powers.
Well, it was both of it. It was the blood of the lion with the special potion that did that. It was just so bad. And then I was like, okay, as far-fetched as this is, and again, I want to get into the fundamentals of this in a little bit, but as far-fetched as this story was, okay. And the acting was horrible. The actresses that were playing Cersei's grandmother and the kids and were just painful to watch.
Ooh, the dialogue was painful.
And, you're watching Russell Crowe, who plays his father in this movie, and you're like, boy, they must have really given him a big bag of Sony money for him to do this.
No question.
An Oscar-winning actor who's been in some of the greatest movies like LA Confidential, Gladiator. I mean, great, fantastic movies. And he's playing this character with, some forced accent, of Middle East, Eastern European accent, just so bad. And then, so we get through that part of the movie, and then we get kind of to present day and him being Kraven the Hunter, and he's going after bad guys. And, he's got this mission where he has this book of people that did wrong, and if you get on his list, you don't get off his list, you end up getting killed.
Again, anti-hero, he's hunting bad guys. Yes, he's brutally killing them, which is wrong. I guess he's wrong, but he's also going through bad guys. He doesn't like poachers. He kills a bunch of poachers. The action scenes are phenomenal. And he is great. What's his name? Anthony Taylor Johnson, I think, is the highlight of this movie. I thought
Oh,
he was
Aaron
great.
Taylor-Johnson.
Aaron Taylor. I think he's the highlight of this movie.
He
I
was
like
great.
he was great.
I
He
thought he
looked
did very well.
phenomenal. It's the writing is so weak and it's so upsetting. And again, Black Adam, they made a bad guy a villain and they never rectified it. As far as I'm concerned, they never rectify it. They made him somewhat of a good guy, and you just
Oh,
can't
he
do
is a
that.
good guy. I mean, he's a good guy with good intentions, and literally, him, Cersei, both good characters, and they're some of the worst villains in Spider-Man comics history. And you made them good guys. Again, this was the fundamental problem that I had with this movie is once again, and we first saw this trailer, our first thought was, oh my God,
They're making him
they're
a hero
making a villain a hero again.
again. Yep.
Again.
Yeah.
Right? Now, notwithstanding what DC did with Black Adam, which that was completely their call, Sony has done this repeatedly. They started with Venom by making Venom one of Spider-Man's arch enemies, one of the most difficult villains he's ever had to fight in his entire career, a good guy, and made 3 movies with that character. Then they did the same thing with Morbius, make the living vampire who just has a bloodthirst and can't help but kill people, but he's a really good guy down underneath, made him a good guy, right? And then they did it with Kraven. So the fact that that was known from the minute that we started this movie pissed me off before we even got started.
Yeah.
And again, I have no idea what Sony's intentions were. Even if, let's just say, for argument's sake, Venom movies, all bangers.
Yeah.
Morbius, big time banger. Madam Web killed it. Kraven the Hunter killed it. What's the end game here? Were they trying to build this cadre of Sinister Six villains? Right. So we'd obviously seen a bunch of them now, or ultimately would have seen a bunch of them in these movies. We'd had the Vulture, we'd have had Rhino, we'd have had a bunch of these Sinister Six villains that we could have brought and said, ultimately, Spider-Man's gonna have to fight against all of them. Why would any one of them want to fight Spider-Man?
Yeah.
Why? In the comic books, Kraven was this legendary game hunter. He had tracked down and killed some of the most dangerous beasts that lived on Earth, right? And again, I'll talk about this here in a minute. Some loose comparisons to how, the powers he had and who he was in the comic books in this movie, loose comparisons.
Very loose.
But ultimately, he said, he was challenged to take out Spider-Man, and he saw that as like the ultimate challenge, and he decided to take him out.
Yeah.
And he was one of the characters he could never defeat. He, as much as he tried to hunt Spider-Man down, he could never defeat him. And he ultimately committed suicide because he was so angry about it.
Yeah.
He could never defeat Spider-Man. But he was a bad dude.
Yeah.
He was a bad guy.
That's my biggest problem. That's my biggest problem.
Calypso was a voodoo priestess who ultimately resurrected Kraven. And she had, fought against Spider-Man and had taken control of other criminals' bodies so that they could fight Spider-Man. I mean, this has happened time and time again over the comic books. And they just insert character A here that we have the rights to. And this is kind of what I was thinking, Titanium.
Do you think, well, let me ask you this before you go on to that next thought. Do you think that Sony is following some kind of like outline of what a movie will be successful and how to make a good superhero movie, and they're just dealt with really only one good superhero, and they're trying to create all these villains, but they just don't know how to do it? Or do you think they've hired writers by either force of hand due to the writer's strike, or they've hired writers that really have no concept of the background or want to know the background of these and want to make it their own? They want to make this character their own. They're given this character, and they're going to mold his backstory and his future story and the way that they want to. And that's why they're doing it.
I will select option D, all of the above.
I like it.
Right?
Yeah, I agree.
And here's my thinking about this. And it's just 100% a money grab. Sony owned the rights to all of these characters. They had temporarily signed away the rights to the most popular character they had the rights to, Spider-Man, to Marvel, and they share that character with
Yeah.
Marvel. And they couldn't make a solo Spider-Man movie without Marvel, and they were reluctant to bring Spider-Man into their own movies, even though they had the full right to do so. They could have put Tom Holland in any one of these movies at any point in time, but they felt that it wasn't the right thing to do because of the relationship they had with Marvel, that they might be doing something wrong because they wouldn't been in part of the same universe, quote unquote. Right? Huge mistake. Here's what I think they should have done. They had access to plenty of heroes
Yeah.
as part of the Spider-Man license,
Of course.
right? That
Yep.
they could have used.
Yep.
They had access to plenty of anti-heroes
Yep.
that they could have used, and they chose to focus on villains and make them heroes, which is huge mistake. They could have done a Miles Morales movie
Yep.
and introduce Kraven or the Rhino or Hammerhead or Tombstone or whoever you want to introduce in these movies as villains and see, oh, they got away.
Instead of Madam Web, they could have done a Spider-Woman movie, which I
Spider-Woman?
think would have been great.
Could have done Spider-Gwen. You could do if you want to do an anti-hero movie, do Black Cat. Black Cat is an anti-hero.
Right.
Probably too similar to Catwoman, which is one of the reasons why they stayed away from it. But again, why take villains and try to make them heroes? And the only reason is because I think it's hubris. I think it's a money grab. I think you're right. They had people that had no idea what these characters were and what their history was. It just
you missed the mark they missed the mark that wide. You got to have some ignorance of the character's background.
Look at what they did in every one of the Tobey Maguire Spider-Man movies. They had Spider-Man who was fighting against villains. And then in the Andrew Garfield movies, you had Spider-Man fighting against villains, right? What they chose to do now is say, okay, Spider-Man's over in the MCU.
Yeah.
We're just going to make movies about the villains we have access to, but they're not really villains. And it was just so stupid.
They had to have been building a team of villains to culminate into their big end game. They had to have thought that
Which
Morbius
is the direction they were moving in.
Right.
So what we heard at the end of the Andrew Garfield era, if you remember the kind of end of the movie, when you had that guy in the hat walking through the little basement of Oscorp, and they had the Rhino suit, and you had the wings of the Vulture, and then you had Doc Ock's arms and all this other stuff down there. They had plans to introduce each one of those characters of the Sinister Six, and they talked about doing a Sinister Six movie, which would have been perfect to set them up as, the villains for Spider-Man. That never happened because they rebooted. They created the Tom Holland version, gave him to Marvel, and then stopped making Spider-Man movies and decided to focus on villain characters for some reason. Again, they could have done Miles Morales. And they decided to start with Venom, and I'm like, wait a minute.
Let's not get upset that they didn't do Miles Morales. They actually did us all as fans a favor by not screwing that up with these writers.
Well, as a matter of fact, the one thing they used Miles Morales for has been spectacular. Into the Spider-Verse, beyond the Spider-Verse, across the Spider-Verse.
Animated series, yeah.
It's been spectacular. And that was the Miles Morales project they chose to do. I just don't get where, number one, I had no idea where they were going with this. This whole concept, like, what's the end game? Let's say those movies were successful.
Well, it didn't help Kraven that a week before the movie launched, Sony announced that they were no longer going to continue making Spider-Man movies.
It's basically what happened to, Shazam 2 and the Flash movie last year when, they had announced that the DC EU was done and that James Gunn was taking over. And James Gunn's like, oh, there might be a future for these actors and these characters in my universe. And we found out that he was going to jettison them all. They were just trying to get their money back.
They were trying to at least save face on making those movies. And I think Sony did the wrong thing by announcing that before the movie actually came out.
And then they ended up pulling this movie from 300 theaters across the country. It was supposed to be released in 1,400 theaters nationwide. It ended up being released in 1,100 theaters theaters because of that announcement, plus the fact that these theaters would rather have a third showing of Moana 2 versus an alternate showing of Kraven that nobody's going to. It's 15% rotten on Rotten Tomatoes. Again, there were good parts of this movie. The action sequences were great. The fight scenes were great.
How about the one time
the chase scene where he was chasing down the car?
No. I agree. The action scenes are worth watching it. The action scenes alone and him and Kraven, the guy that plays Kraven, is good enough for me to watch the movie when it's streaming for free. I won't go to the theater again to see it, but I will never watch Madam Web again. That's how bad it was.
But you're going to talk about the CGI?
Yeah, I mean, there was some dialogue with Calypso, and if you watch her mouth when
her mouth was CGI.
It was CGI. They made the character say something completely different than what she actually said. So it's so obvious.
Obviously re-recorded.
It was as bad as the mustache in Superman.
Right. They had obviously re-recorded some dialogue.
Yes.
And then they ended up going back, and instead of reshooting those scenes, they basically CGI'd her mouth to say the words that she had re-recorded.
Correct.
And not like it furthered the plot at all or anything like that, but again, Anthony Taylor Johnson was great.
He was the best part of
action sequences were great. Like
they're off the charts.
That chase scene when his brother gets kidnapped and he's chasing that car down was fantastic.
Or the first 8 minutes of the movie that they actually released online. It was really good. They break into the prison. He does some bad shit, and then I think that was great.
Yeah, it was awesome. And I here's what I asked my son. I said, and the dialogue and the history and the backstory and all the other things could have been fixed, but if they had just made a movie creating a brand new character that had gotten some powers from being bitten by a lion, and then getting some potion from a gypsy, and ended up with these powers and ended up, hunting down bad guys, it could have been an entertaining movie.
No question.
But one of the worst parts of it was based on a known villain that we had some preconceived expectations of what this character should have been. And they went completely against that.
The whole Russian mob thing with the Rhino fighting for power and taking control over this empire of mobsters and arms traders was clunky. It was confusing. The actor that played the Rhino was kind of goofy and non-threatening. I didn't like that at all. The way they portrayed the Rhino, like he saw some doctor that gave him powers. It wasn't explained. Even Kraven's powers weren't really explained very well. You didn't know what his limitations were.
So let's get into that. And this is where I had some of the fundamental problems. Again, every one of these characters they had in the movie had some loose ties to how their powers in the comics and how they got them.
Yeah.
And I'm not completely against changing that for modern sake,
right?
Just like they did with a bunch of them, like they did with Captain Marvel and a bunch of. They just changed the way these characters end up getting imbued with these powers,
unless it's Miss Marvel, and that was ridiculous, and I'll never forgive them.
Yes, but okay, so Kraven the Hunter in the comic books did take a voodoo serum, which gave him heightened senses and heightened strength.
Voodoo serum, yep.
So he did get that.
I got a little of that right here.
He did get that, but he didn't have the blood of a lion in him, and he didn't have this. He was in tune or in touch with the animals of the universe, and he could like command them and like speak to them, and that all that thing. I was like, where did this come from? The Rhino in this movie. Somewhat similar. He did go to this doctor who experimented on him, and then ultimately the Rhino character ended up putting on enormous amounts of mass, right? Like muscle and bone density, which basically made him, a lot bigger and stronger.
Yeah, I wanted to see him like the Juggernaut.
But it was a suit that he wore. The Rhino suit was a suit that had like Kevlar style skin. That was impervious to bullets and things like that, but it was a suit he wore. And, it wasn't like he actually turned into a rhino, which seemed odd in this thing. Similar thing with the Chameleon. Like the Chameleon was originally a really good actor. He could imitate anybody's voice.
Yeah, they portrayed that pretty good. Yeah.
Costumes, to, portray other people, then ultimately went under some similar experimentation to kind of be able to morph the way he looked over time. And so that was somewhat true, but they wasted that character in this movie and didn't really use him
Agree.
for what they could have used him for. And again, Calypso, look, she was a voodoo priestess, and
Unnecessary.
just the way that they used and made her a good person, it just,
Yeah.
just exhausting.
Yeah.
And again, bad. So as Titanium mentioned, Sony has come out and basically said the experiment is over. We are now putting the current version of the Sonyverse, or if you want to call it the Spider-Verse without Spider-Man, we're putting it to bed, right? That it's done, that this version is done, which for all intents and purposes, this has been the Venom universe, right? If we all were tuned into it, every one of these movies happened in the same universe that the Venom movies happened in, right? And ultimately they could have run across each other, which never happened. But that's completely gone. We know the current version of Venom, and Tom Hardy is not coming back as Venom, so that's done. No more Morbius, no more Madam Web, thank God. No more Kraven. This whole iteration is done. So what happens from here? And there's been a number of rumors and speculation about what's happening going forward. Rumor number one, Sony's going to reboot and retry. And what they mean by that is we're going to start over from scratch. And that may also include recasting Spider-Man after Tom Holland. So Tom Holland has, I believe, a 3-picture contract to finish out, including some of the pictures like Doomsday and Secret War that he has to do. But once that's done, they may choose to recast Spider-Man and start over from scratch. And all of these characters, Venom and, Rhino and Chameleon, and every one of them is likely going to be. So that's rumor number one. They're going to start over from scratch. We heard that they may be
very low on the total poll.
Be doing something with the Null, God of symbiote stuff in the future and everything else. But that's all speculation. We have no idea. But that's rumor number one. The other rumor that came to light this past week,
more likely rumor,
is that Sony is now exploring the possibility of selling back the rights to Spider-Man to Marvel. And we've talked about this on the show before, Titanium. There's a couple of things working against them. They have a contractual obligation to begin production on another Spider-Man movie next year. They have a contractual obligation to release that movie within 5 years of the previous movie coming out. And that clock is ticking because
no question.
That movie came out in December of 2021. So they don't have a long time.
No.
And I think, look, in all honesty, all of the losses from Kraven, Madam Web, Morbius, and any of the Venom movies that did not do well in the box office, let's say Venom little less than broke even, the other ones deadpanned and lost money. They made more money on the 3 movies they made with Marvel because they kept. So the first 2 movies they did with Marvel, they kept 95% of the box office. And then they had to renegotiate. And I think Marvel ended up taking a little bit bigger share of the pie on the third one, No Way Home or No Way Home. But anyway, they made more money on those movies to definitely cover any of the losses they made on all the other ones. So owning Spider-Man has been a profit for them, and they've been splitting the revenue for any merchandise with Marvel as well. So there's a revenue share on merchandise too. So they're making money there. So are they continuing to lose money? I think they could. I mean, this is the most valuable IP that's.
There's no way they're selling. There's no way, in my opinion, will they sell Spider-Man back to Marvel.
You don't think? No way.
There's no way. He's too big of a commodity, and the IP, as you said,
they paid $7 million for the rights to Spider-Man when they signed this deal, and they could easily sell it for.
It's like buying a $2 lottery ticket and winning $700 million. I mean, there's no way they're selling it back to Marvel.
You don't think they're going to give it back?
I think what the smart deal here is to negotiate something similar to the Marvel relationship with Sony, making Spider-Man a piece of the pie, completely cut them out of the creative, have Marvel do all the production and the creative
But here's the challenge with that,
and give the
Titanium.
distribution rights to Sony.
But here's the challenge with that, Titanium. Marvel doesn't want to give away those distribution rights. And then what happens when he shows up in a movie that's not his movie? So is it a Spider-Man movie?
Well, all that can be negotiated.
Yeah, okay. If it's a Spider-Man movie, Sony keeps 75% of the box office, and Sony gets the other, and Marvel gets the other 25%. But if it's an MCU movie, it's 95% Marvel and 5% to Sony, just because we have Spider-Man in it. I mean, you got to negotiate that stuff, but I don't know if Marvel wants to do that. I don't know. Look, there's lots of rumors about the history of or the future of Marvel Studios as well. There's rumors out there that Bob Iger is shopping Marvel Studios around and is willing to sell it to anybody that's willing to buy it. And it's possible that if there's a company out there with a lot of money that's willing to pay for Marvel Studios, maybe they're willing to buy back those Spider-Man rights as well and sign a big check. I don't even know what it would take to get those back, but the fact is Sony's got to pony up and make some progress here, or they're going to lose those rights. And so if they're facing losing the rights, so let's say—
That's what I'm saying. What an incentive. At least get something out of it.
Like I said, if we're going to lose these rights anyway, hey, I tell you what, let's just sell it back to you guys. We'll take 150 million, 200 million. You guys can have it
it'll
back.
be more than 200 million, but yeah.
Okay. Whatever it is. You can say, do you want it back?
I think the smart way is to negotiate the deal. Like I said, is to, make some kind of deal where they're still a part of it, but Marvel is the main horse that they run on. So we'll see that I think we're going to know something real soon here.
Here's my thinking. I don't care what they end up doing. Marvel's in charge of Spider-Man 4 to a large extent, not completely. Sony does have some influence there. I hope it's good. Speculation out there about what it's going to be about and everything else, I don't know. But if they choose to reboot and start over from scratch, I believe that they should do a very similar storyline to what they did in Into the Spider-Verse, where you have a brand new Spider-Man and you introduce Miles Morales into that movie. You have that first movie be a team-up movie, and then you go off and make your own Miles Morales movie on his own after that. And then you introduce these villain characters into those movies. There's a way to do it right. They just they've got no clue.
No. That's the scary part, is Sony has lost their way.
I'm angry at people like—
At some point they lost their way, because they had it right with Tobey Maguire and Andrew Garfield. They were doing very well. At some point they lost their way, and that's why I'm saying, could it be the writers?
The second Andrew Garfield
Amy Pascal
movie, yeah, she's a joke. That the second Andrew Garfield movie did not do well, and at that time Marvel was killing it in the box office with their movies.
Yeah.
And that's why they decided to sign the deal with Marvel that they did, because they were playing catch up and just having a hard time competing. Look, I don't know what's going to happen. Look, I'm glad this universe is put to bed.
Right.
Please, for all the comic book media studios out there, please stop trying to make heroes out of your villains.
Yeah.
Okay. Look, and we're going to do that in a future episode. Titanium and I are going to list the greatest superhero comic book media villains of all time. And we're going to tell you why they were so good. And then you can equate that directly to how good the movie they were in was.
Right.
And you'll see why making villains bad is good for business. And it worries me to some extent. And I think that that's what Marvel's doing with Doomsday. It worries me to some extent. How do you we have way more heroes in the MCU right now than we do villains.
Yeah.
And the concept of Secret Wars was, we're going to pitch the heroes against the villains in this battle world and make them fight against each other. Well, if I don't have enough villains, the heroes are always going to win.
Right.
They haven't done a good job of establishing a cadre of villains.
Right.
And I think they need to do that. So I think Doomsday is going to set that
I think
stage.
they did a great job with Loki in that story arc. Loki was a villain for many, many movies.
You can redeem villains.
And no question, that story arc of him and turn that into. But right now, I think the only one that really gets it, and the only one that is on point as far as what a true villain origin story should be, is the Penguin. I think that story and the way they depicted the Penguin is so good and so brilliant. And it shows 4 nominations for Emmys or something like that, 3 or 4. It shows that, yes, we will show up for bad guys. We will show up. I think that's why Loki was so popular, because he was a very well-written bad guy.
Well, I don't want to spoil anything about our list, but the greatest villain in a comic book movie of all time was Heath Ledger's Joker in The Dark Knight. That's my opinion. Okay. And he won an Oscar for it posthumously, unfortunately. Won an Oscar for portraying that character, and that movie was a banger.
Yeah.
Okay, because he was just straight up crazy and a bad dude. You didn't have to like him. You didn't have to root for him. You wanted the hero to beat him because he was so bad.
Yeah.
And it's just like, come on, guys.
Yeah.
Stop doing that. Stop it.
Yeah.
There's enough heroes out there. Make good quality hero-based movies and have them fight the bad guys. And it's okay sometimes if the bad guys win.
Yeah, no question. Absolutely. Yeah. All right, Professor. All right, take a sip. Take a sip of your drink. Let's calm down. Well, hey, Professor, guess what? The bell has rung. School is over.
All right, that's it for us this week. We'll be back next week for more Super Talk. To get in touch with us on social media, hit us up via email, supertalkpodcast@outlook.com, or at supertalkpod on Twitter. Until then, stay super, everyone. Corner of the